Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're putting on our detective hats and diving into the mind of a true psychological pioneer, Carl Jung. We're going to follow along as he uses data, dreams, and some incredible intuition to solve a medical mystery that had stumped doctors for 17 long years. And it all starts with our patient, a young woman trapped by an illness that had no name and seemingly no cure.
So let's set the scene. We've got a 24-year-old woman, and her life is completely dominated by this bizarre, debilitating condition. And this isn't something new. She's been sick since she was just a kid. She's seen countless doctors, tried all sorts of treatments, and absolutely nothing has worked.
And listen to this. These are her own words. This gives you a terrifying window into what she's going through every single day. She doesn't just feel hot. She's convinced her head has a fever of 104 degrees. She vividly imagines bleeding a wash basin full of blood. Now, for any other doctor, these might just be complaints. But for Jung, these are the first crucial clues to a much deeper story. When you look at her full list of symptoms, it's just a bizarre collection of things. It all kicks off in childhood with a physical tic, what they used to call hysterical chorea. But then, right when she hits puberty, the tics stop, and bam! They're replaced by these intense sensations in her head. On top of that, you've got these intense phobias, these recurring nightmares, waking hallucinations, and this absolute unshakable belief that the cause is 100% physical. To Jung, this didn't look random at all. This looked like a pattern, like a coded message screaming to be deciphered. So how do you even begin to crack a code like that? Jung knew he couldn't just rely on what she was consciously telling him. He needed a tool to get past her defenses and talk directly to the hidden, unconscious parts of her mind. And for that, he turned to a really cutting-edge technique for the time, the word association test. The best way to think about this test is like a kind of mental sonar. Jung throws out a simple word, say water, and the patient has to respond with the very first thing that pops into her head. No thinking, just reacting. But here's the clever part. Jung wasn't just interested in the word she said. He was looking at how she said it. Any hesitation, a strange answer, or just complete silence. For Jung, those were like the little pings on the sonar screen, signaling a hidden, emotionally charged knot of ideas he called a complex. And when the first results came back, wow, they were astounding. Just look at the data from test 2, right when she was admitted. She had 0% internal associations. That means she wasn't making a single connection based on the meaning of the words. It was all superficial, like hearing head and just saying headache. And then you see this. 39 times she just failed to respond at all. The data was crystal clear. Her mind was almost completely checked out. So what was Jung's big idea here? It was pretty radical. He argued that the patient wasn't just distracted. Her attention was being actively hijacked from the inside. He believed there was this powerful, unconscious complex built entirely around her illness, and it was sucking up all of her mental energy. It was like a psychological black hole, leaving absolutely no attention for anything else, not even for a simple word game. For weeks, Jung keeps at it, working with the patient, but the tests, they don't really change much. It's looking like a dead end. And then, all of a sudden, the data makes a massive shift. This was it, the first major breakthrough in the whole case. I mean, just look at this. The difference is night and day. Check out the jump in internal associations. From a flat 0 to 57% in just over a month. It's like a light just flicked on in her mind. Her brain, which was stuck on the surface of words, was suddenly diving deep into their meaning. She was making real connections again. This chart just makes it so clear, doesn't it? You can literally watch her mind coming back online. That part of her psyche that understands meaning, the part that had been completely silent, was suddenly the loudest voice in the room. This was hard, objective proof that something in the therapy was starting to work. And you have to understand, this wasn't just about numbers on a page. This was the first real, tangible sign of her. The actual person, her core personality, starting to fight its way out from under the suffocating weight of this illness complex. She was finally starting to reconnect with the world around her. Okay, so her conscious mind is starting to open up. Now Jung decides it's time to knock on another door, the door to her dreams. He was convinced that dreams are the unconscious mind's way of telling its story, and he wanted to find the hidden narrative behind all her bizarre symptoms.
Now get this. The patient said she only ever had 2 kinds of dreams. She was either surrounded by blood or she was surrounded by fire. That's it. So Jung, He offers this really simple, almost poetic interpretation. He basically says, blood is red, red means love. Fire is red and hot. Maybe fire means love too. He was planting a tiny seed, just suggesting a whole new way for her to think about her own inner world.
And that seed took root and grew in the most incredible way. After Jung made that simple suggestion, her dream symbols started to evolve in this amazing sequence. First, the vague blood and fire are replaced by a dream of noisy mating cats. Then it shifts to mice coming from dog kennels, which she links to memories of watching dogs mate. Then it gets even more personal and threatening. A hungry black dog jumps on her. And finally, in the climax of this dream sequence, the dog transforms into that terrifying black man from her waking hallucinations. So you see where this is going, right? The black man wasn't just some spooky ghost in her nightmares. He was the end result of this whole symbolic chain reaction, the final personified symbol of the very thing her psyche was terrified of, a sexual future that was so frightening it was literally making her sick. Okay, so now Jung has all the pieces of the puzzle on the table. He's got the clues from her personal history, he's got the hard data from the association tests, and now he's got this symbolic story from her dreams. He could finally piece together the real origin of her illness, not as a disease, but as a deeply elaborate psychological escape plan. The entire investigation comes down to this one critical period in her life, her 12th year. It was like a perfect storm. Her childhood tic disorder suddenly gets way worse, which conveniently gets her out of going to school. At the same time, a friend tells her about the facts of life, and then her own mother delivers a warning that will seal her fate. And this quote from the patient is the absolute core of the entire mystery. Her own mother, who had been left severely disabled by childbirth, drew a direct, terrifying line connecting marriage and sexuality with a future of pain, disability, and suffering. The normal path to becoming a woman was presented to her as a path to total destruction. So this led Jung to his final diagnosis of the psychological mechanism at play. He called it displacement from below upwards. It sounds a little academic, but the idea is actually pretty straightforward. The intense heat of her own emerging sexuality, the below, was just too threatening and dangerous to even acknowledge. So her unconscious mind did something clever. It moved those sensations to a safer, non-sexual part of our body. Her head, the upwards. All of it, the hot head, the pressure, the dreams of blood, it was all a displaced, symbolic performance of the very biological reality she'd been taught to fear. And this brings us to the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. Her illness wasn't just some passive thing that happened to her. It was an active, unconscious strategy for survival, and it was being orchestrated by an incredibly powerful, hidden complex. This insight from Jung is, honestly, it's a bit chilling. He realized that the patient had developed an unconscious will to be ill. A part of her psyche, almost like a second personality, was actively fighting to keep the illness going because it served a vital protective purpose. And in order to do that, it was literally devouring her healthy self. Because when you step back and look at it, the illness was, in a twisted way, her greatest ally. It was her solution to all of life's problems. It got her out of school, which she hated. It shielded her from that terrifying fate her mother predicted, and it guaranteed her a safe, comfortable, childlike role where she would always be cared for by her family. Her illness wasn't a malfunction. It was a fortress her unconscious mind had built to protect her. And that leaves us with this really powerful final thought. This entire case was solved by this brilliant combination of hard data and deep symbolic interpretation. But it makes you wonder, if a hidden, unconscious story could build an elaborate 17-year illness to protect this young woman, what powerful, invisible stories might be quietly directing our own lives today?